Thanks, Doreen. Thanks a lot. And I think that was an excellent, comprehensive overview of the healthcare landscape today. Also, a very good peek into the future that you've given that says the way, in particular, sales reps need to be and what they are today. The two are quite different. I thought you also made a very interesting point that this change has always been there, but been taking place very slowly. And this whole COVID thing's accelerated that change. And the fact is that technology remains pretty much the same. It's always been there. Maybe it'll incrementally improve. Processes are pretty much there. But the important area really is around behavior, is around saying how do we therefore get the sales rep at the ground level where the rubber touches the road? How do we get them to change their behavior in a positive fashion that impacts them positively, therefore improves their performance, which means for the company itself, the overall performance improves. So that is the key question. And I like the questions that you asked in there. We'll try and provide some answers around how can we actually do it. So while we've agreed that change of behavior is an important element, and of course upskilling as well, how do you go about doing that is the topic of the next 15 minutes that I'll kind of walk through and look at saying how do we take learnings from a slightly unrelated area for typical enterprises, which is behavioral economics and behavior science, and what's today called neuroeconomics, which is a combination of neuroscience and behavioral economics. How do we combine these two? And in order to impact people at large scale, how do we therefore use technology and AI to do that is the topic that I'll touch upon now and actually walk through a few live case studies and examples, and we'll take questions later. So we'll talk through about saying how can neuroeconomics and AI solve this conundrum that Gauri's raised about saying the new age sales rep, or what that phrase of being rep ready. How do you get the sales reps rep ready in the current context, the way things are changing? Most of us agree that post this transition now, we will embark on a world that's going to be a little different from what we have today. And a lot of examples were given. I will also touch upon how can we handle this hybrid model that we're going to have of some degree of remote working and some degree of face-to-face interaction. How do we kind of tackle this combination? What are the challenges and how can it get tackled effectively? But before I do that, there will be a poll that will get flashed to you. And I want all of you to just quickly answer this poll, and then I'll take it from there on. So please answer the poll. There are two questions that are going to come one after the other. If you can quickly answer those two questions, I will then proceed with the rest of this.
I'm just putting on the first question.
These are very simple questions. We just do very simple questions, and they are personal questions for all of us. This has nothing to do with technology or with macro or micro or behavioral economics. These are personal questions, and these are questions that are relevant in the current context.
So I'll quickly launch the second question. I'll just wait for 5 seconds. I've just launched the second question for the poll. You can go ahead and give your answers. Yes, we have stopped the poll. Ramesh, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So there was a reason I asked this question, and the reason was in this period, which has been unprecedented. I don't think any of us have ever faced a period like this where we've been kind of locked into our respective homes for such a long period of time. And most people that I know have, the answers that I hear in the poll, and thank you for answering the poll. Answers that I hear in the poll are consistent with answers that I get when we talk to everybody else, which is say majority of the people had some intention at least to say, let's get a little bit disciplined. Here's a chance for us, even though we are locked in, to be a little more disciplined. And also the majority of people are not entirely happy with what they've actually done. So there was a high intention to follow a fitness regimen or to get a little more disciplined about lifestyle. The majority of people 4 weeks down the line are saying maybe we could have done it better. And that's what the poll results also say. So why is this? Let's just drill this down, because this was also the subject of a similar study many years ago by a group of behavioral economists at Stanford University. Of course, not in the context of a lockdown, but in the context of the normal lives that people lead, which is what they asked a large number. And the answers here pretty much mirror what happened then as well. So let's just quickly go through. Most people had an intention of doing it, following a disciplined lifestyle. Only a small number actually followed. So majority of people are not happy with the way they themselves have done that. Why? Is it lack of knowledge? And if we think through, it's not lack of knowing what to do, right? All of us have a good understanding of saying what do we need to do to get more disciplined, whether it's diet, nutrition, exercise, the amount that you sleep, reducing your stress. So knowledge is not a barrier to have actually followed it. Yet we are unhappy about what we did. Is it lack of motivation? It's not, because clearly most people, even according to the poll, have said, yeah, we're motivated to do this. And that's something that we wanted to do voluntarily on our own. So it's not lack of motivation either. It's not also lack of understanding what benefit we get out of it. So all these three are available. You know what to do. You're motivated to do it. You know you get a lot of benefit out of doing it. And yet people are not comfortable with the result or the end action that's there. So are these three alone enough to take action? Was the question that was looked at by, like I said, a group of these Stanford economists. And they found that there is something missing in here to translate intention, motivation, knowledge of how to do something, and even the benefits are all lead to a good intention. But how do you translate that intent or intention into action is really a bit of that puzzle. A solution did come out of that, and I'll talk through that solution now. The solution, one of the solutions that came out of that, which proved hugely popular and hugely successful, is today well known as the nudge. The nudge, and the author of the nudge won the Nobel Prize for Behavioral Economics a couple of years ago in 2017. That's Richard Thaler. And in this book, he says a phrase, a sentence that he says is really true, that humans or people are not completely rational. And a nudge is nothing but a choice, an aspect of a choice that you give someone saying do something that changes behavior without changing any options or giving all the options to the people, and without changing economic incentive. So what does that mean? That means a nudge does not say, I will give you some incentive in order to do something. No, all it does is say, I have an intent to do something, and a nudge will help me convert that intent to action. That's what it does. So this nudge turned out to be very, very successful in areas of healthcare, in areas of public policy. And if you think about what Gauri spoke about sales reps also, or medical reps, it's not very different. Most of them have a good level of knowledge of what to do. They're also motivated to do well. And certainly they know what they get out of it, right? Which is the living that they earn out of it. But does that always intent to do well translate into action is the key question. And therefore, there is a possibility of saying, can we use the same principles of nudge or nudge theory to coach MRs on a daily basis in terms of converting their intentions on a day-to-day basis into action, which means that action gets successful because you've triggered it. And that feedback then gets the MR to continue doing those actions on a regular basis. So the concept of neuroeconomics, therefore, is to say, can we use principles of behavior science, and I'll touch upon it in the next slide, in order to trigger action from people, but in a way that they trigger action on something that they themselves want. So this can be done if you want to do it at large scale. You want to do it at 6,000, 10,000, 12,000 MRs. You have to use technology to be able to do it consistently. So this is not a training program, because a training program is a one-time intervention. And what you really want to do is to do this on a day-to-day basis, pretty much like our intent to be fit, right? Which is a day-to-day thing that you need to follow, not something that you decide once and then review a quarter later, but it's an everyday cycle that you follow. And the nudging is the same concept. So the way to really do that at scale is to also harness the power of artificial intelligence. So how do you do that? The way to do that is to use what in behavior science is called persuasive technology. Persuasive technology are nudges that persuade people to take action based on their intent, but also do that depending on the type of personality different people are. Different people have different motivational triggers. Some people are motivated by a sense of mastery, wanting to do something well. Some people are motivated by a sense of responsibility. Some are motivated by incentives. Some are motivated by wanting to do better than others. So each person has different types of motivational triggers. And persuasive technology looks at which of these triggers works for which individual. And therefore, for you to understand how to personalize this and say, we can't use the same principle for everyone, but can we personalize the kind of trigger or nudge for every single individual based on their personality? That's where AI comes in, because AI is able to look at saying, I've sent a nudge and I've looked at what is the response of that nudge for that individual MR. And over a period of a few weeks, 2-3 weeks, it gets better and better at understanding what motivational triggers move an MR to action and which ones don't. And that's where the machine learning or the AI comes in. And that feeds back into the nudge engine that nudges. So this is the concept that's really worked in terms of tackling the behavioral side, because we are not talking about giving more information, more analytics, more knowledge, because as we saw before, knowledge or motivation or benefits alone does not translate to action all the time. A lot of studies say that all of this knowledge, benefits, motivation translates to 60% of behavior or of performance. 40% is the gap that's due to employee behavior, which you can translate into lack of engagement, lack of initiative, drive on a day-to-day basis. And so that 40% is a massive gap. Now, this is the theory. We've actually implemented this theory in practice. How is that implemented? That's implemented through a mobile-based application, which is carried by MRs as well as the entire hierarchy of sales. So MRs, their managers, and the whole hierarchy up to the head of the business. And basically, our application does tracking of daily performance based on KPIs. Those KPIs are taken from your or the company's enterprise systems. It could be a CRM system, a Salesforce automation, or multiple systems that are there. So our app, we do not replace a CRM. We don't create any data. We integrate with those CRM. So therefore, we take the same data that you already use at a transaction. Well, but our AI engine then does analytics on what kind of persona each person is, what kind of nudges may need to be sent to everyone, and does therefore coaching for individuals on a daily basis to drive the right behaviors. Similarly, it also triggers off to managers in terms of who are the people who are currently performing well, who are people who need a little more help, and therefore what actions can they take on a daily basis proactively in order to help their team do better. So that's the concept. It's now being deployed. We have over 1 lakh people using this application, users that are using this application across all of these companies, over 30 companies in multiple countries. We actually send out more than 3 lakh nudges on a daily basis. Every day, more than 3 lakh nudges. And we capture 10 lakh behavior instances every day. So as a result now, we are able to look at saying what are successful behavior traits in different industries for field reps, salespeople that work, and what are the kind of interventions, therefore, that can be taken on a day-to-day basis to help perform. So far, I've spoken about companies, I've spoken about a lakh people using this for the last few years. What is the impact? The impact is significant. And there are different companies that have different types of impact, but net, we've had average of 15% increase in sales performance. More than 5 times the number of people who've hit their target or achieved the quota, and so on, cross-sell and so on. So it's a significant business benefit that the company gets because every individual has improved. So the concept here is, for most enterprises, technology is top down. It's decided at an enterprise level and drilled down till the person at the lowest end actually has the most work to do but the least benefit. Ours is the reverse. The person at the lowest end, which is the MR in your case, gets maximum benefit but does almost no work on this application because it coaches him or her on a daily basis. So this is how it's actually being used up in the old normal. Now, how does this get used in the new normal? Just like Gauri spoke about how she's spoken to a number of people in the last 3-4 weeks, we've spoken to a large number of or got a lot of inputs from most of our 1 lakh users that we have, looking at saying, what does the new normal look like and how do we adjust to that? So if you think about remote work, which is what is happening today owing to the lockdown, once this shifts, of course, I guess we'll get into a hybrid. But if you think about it, most people said a lot of focus in this period was on how do you get the infrastructure to work remotely in place, right? Which could be the laptop, which could be connectivity, it could be security, the technology that's there, etc., which is the workplace and the technology, relatively less on the behavior part. And for most people, being locked up is a significant difference from being going to an office every day, working with your peers, being in touch with your hierarchy, and then going out and meeting customers face to face is very different. All of a sudden, you're locked up in, and there are a lot of concerns that come. And Gauri spoke about some of those concerns, right? Insecurity. Am I contributing enough? What's happening on a daily basis? What are the changes that's taking place? How's it going to be a month down the line? So there are a lot of concerns, questions. And that is where I think the importance of the new world or the new normal will begin to come in, where this is going to become a fact of life in terms of a combination of the two, which means there are new expectations across the entire hierarchy or new concerns. Frontline teams like MRs got their inputs on a daily basis. Now, all of a sudden, they'll have to be much more independent. And I think Gauri made a great point that many of them have to reinvent themselves in terms of delivering quality interaction rather than quantity interaction. And she gave a lot of examples of how doctors are open to quality interaction. So all of a sudden, what they really need to do is very different from what they did earlier. But that's something they'll have to do to an extent independently as well. So there is a period of coaching that you do, which they will need in order to be able to do that transition to being more effective frontline marketing medical reps. Similarly, managers also have a problem because all of a sudden they don't meet everyone face to face on a regular basis. Now they'll have to look at saying, how do I keep my teams more engaged? How do I keep them? How do I know who's engaged, who's not? How do I know who's motivated, who's not? How do I know who to support at a point of time when they need help? How do I know who to acknowledge or appreciate when they're doing well? So all of a sudden, they have a different set of challenges. And the leaders, of course, have the biggest challenge of all, which is saying, I have this large field force, and now how do I change the culture and the way they operate in a short period of time? And again, Gauri made that important point. It's nuanced implementation. It's good to have that strategy, but how do I know that it's being adopted at a frontline level in order for it to get effective? So our interactions with a lot of our companies that we are working with and the 1 lakh users is strategies have already come up in place, but it's the implementation that's really taking up time. And that's where what we've got has helped people a great deal. So we've looked at our learnings over the last 3-4 weeks and feedback from a lot of our users and looked at saying, behaviorally, what is it that's already changed and what's likely to remain changed now over a period of time. And therefore, how do we get our product to help with that? So I'll just quickly go through those. Number one, we've seen the entire area of performance management has undergone a shift. And Gauri pointed out some examples, right, which spoke about saying doctors now want quality of interaction. So it's a different measure all of a sudden, right? It's not about saying, have you met so many category A doctors and parroted, like she quoted, right? Parroting rather than having a dialogue. Now it's about saying, how do you have a quality dialogue with your customer? And there are other KPIs that change as well. So there is now going to be constant change of KPIs in order to enhance performance on the whole. Second is because of the distance now, which is physical distance, obviously, and people working more digitally, the digital channel is an excellent way to use for coaching. And if you can do that using AI and using, like I said, neuroeconomics earlier, which is saying, how do I therefore positively change behavior of people using neuroeconomics and deliver that through digital and artificial intelligence in terms of personalization for an individual? That concept of coaching digitally becomes a big thing now for field sales people because it's a constant set of interactions that they have. The third is also communication with peers, with the hierarchy as well. And we've got in our application, we've got what we call a notice board where you can use to communicate as well as use to do the next part, which is building ability. And again, Gauri spoke about the new traits of the salesperson that needs to emerge, which are different from what they are doing today, which requires therefore a degree of not only one-time training, but ongoing coaching and training or micro learning and micro training, which is something that we've got built into our application. We've also got an assessment or a quiz feature where you can figure out saying, have people really understood and have they adopted all the changes that they are supposed to do, and have they been successful in upskilling themselves? The next part is really being connected to your work groups, which could be a peer group, your hierarchy, and you interact with it in some form. And our nudges are actually not many to one. These are interactive nudges, meaning the user who gets them can interact with those nudges, ask questions, ask for more details, say whether you like that or not. So there's a lot of interaction that takes place. So in some sense, it's like a virtual coach, but a digital coach that people use. And therefore, it becomes something that they trust because it gives them information, it gives them coaching inputs that they find valuable, or they can say it's valuable or not. And it changes based on that. So in some sense, it's a friend for them. It's a digital friend. All of this, I think, will lead into what we today are calling the business unusual from our standpoint. A few months down the line, that will become business usual. But today, it's an unusual business for us because you have to adopt some of these new practices that are here, and that most of you, many of you in your companies are also going to look at it. So, how do the old normal and the new normal work? The old normal takes a lot of things for granted. There is face-to-face interaction. You meet someone on a regular basis, and you go and meet your customers as well. And therefore, the monitoring actually happens over a period of time because some things are taken for granted. Under the new normal, a lot of that face-to-face will begin to come down. But you can use digital far more effectively. And today, people probably use the cell phone much more than they talk to somebody else. So this is an ubiquitous device that's there today. And therefore, you can use that to be able to coach people and understand their personalities, behaviors in order to get them to do better. And that becomes a cycle. And the same set of nudging then goes to managers who can use the same inputs, therefore, to align what the MR receives, or Raj in this case receives, to align. And therefore, for Raj, the inputs that he gets from the digital coach and the inputs he gets from his hierarchy are aligned and are similar. And therefore, it's a multiplier effect in terms of overall performance. One last word before I close this and then open it up for questions. Is this a CRM? It's not a CRM. Is it analytics? It's not just analytics. So what is it? A CRM basically provides information, right? It provides a transaction layer, and most companies will have an analytics layer that then cuts and slices that data, it aggregates to produce all of your strategies that you do. But we tackle the motivation and the individual drive, motivation, and the behavior of individuals in order to get them to use your CRM analytics to perform better. So with this, I'll stop. We'll open it up for questions. You can use the chat or the question feature to put your questions in, and between Gauri and I, we'll answer questions that are relevant to each one of us. So thank you once again for taking the time out on this, and on a Saturday to come in for this webinar. Please feel free to ask any questions.
So Ramesh, we have got questions. I'll just pass it on to you both.